Question 1. The risk matrix shows a moderate to high likelihood of data exfiltration via unauthorized employee access to sensitive client information. The IT security team proposes implementing a comprehensive employee monitoring solution that captures all keystrokes, website visits, and email content on all company-issued devices, regardless of whether the activity is work-related or during work hours. This is intended to create an irrefutable audit trail for any potential security incident. Which of the following approaches best balances the organization's security needs with employee privacy rights and legal compliance in the United States? Option A. Deploy the proposed comprehensive monitoring solution to capture all employee activity, as the potential for data exfiltration justifies a broad approach to ensure maximum detection capabilities. Option B. Rely solely on endpoint detection and response (EDR) software that flags suspicious activity without actively monitoring specific data access or communication content, assuming this is sufficient to deter data exfiltration. Option C. Implement targeted monitoring of access to sensitive client databases and systems, website visits to known malicious or high-risk sites, and outbound email traffic containing keywords indicative of data exfiltration, coupled with a clear, comprehensive employee policy on monitoring. Option D. Conduct periodic, unannounced physical surveillance of employees' workstations to observe their screen activity and identify any suspicious behavior. The correct answer is C. Implement targeted monitoring of access to sensitive client databases and systems, website visits to known malicious or high-risk sites, and outbound email traffic containing keywords indicative of data exfiltration, coupled with a clear, comprehensive employee policy on monitoring. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate to high likelihood of data exfiltration via unauthorized employee access to sensitive client information. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the organization's legitimate need to protect its assets and client data with employees' rights to privacy and legal protections against intrusive monitoring. A hasty or overly broad monitoring strategy could lead to legal repercussions, damage employee morale, and create a hostile work environment, while insufficient monitoring leaves the organization vulnerable to significant financial and reputational harm. Careful judgment is required to implement a proportionate and legally compliant monitoring program. The correct approach involves implementing targeted monitoring of specific systems and data access points that are directly related to the identified risk of data exfiltration, with clear, documented policies communicated to employees. This approach is best professional practice because it adheres to the principles of necessity and proportionality. Under U.S. regulations, such as those derived from the Electronic Communications Privacy Act (ECPA) and various state privacy laws, employers generally have the right to monitor employee communications and activities on company-owned equipment, provided there is a legitimate business purpose and employees have been put on notice. This targeted approach minimizes intrusion into employee privacy while effectively addressing the specific risk identified. It also aligns with ethical consideration of transparency and fairness. An incorrect approach would be to implement pervasive, indiscriminate surveillance of all employee computer activity, including personal communications and off-hours usage, without a clear, specific business justification beyond a general concern for security. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it likely exceeds the scope of legitimate business interests and could violate employee privacy rights under various U.S. federal and state laws. Such broad monitoring can be deemed overly intrusive and may not withstand legal scrutiny, potentially leading to lawsuits and regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to monitor employee activity without informing them of the monitoring program through a clear, accessible policy. This is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Transparency is a cornerstone of responsible employee monitoring. Failing to notify employees violates their reasonable expectation of privacy and can be seen as deceptive, leading to distrust and potential legal challenges. Many jurisdictions have specific requirements for employee notification regarding monitoring. A third incorrect approach would be to use the data collected from monitoring for purposes unrelated to the stated security objective, such as evaluating employee productivity for disciplinary action, unrelated to data security, or for discriminatory purposes. This constitutes a regulatory and ethical failure as it misuses collected data, potentially violating privacy laws and creating grounds for discrimination claims. The purpose of monitoring must be clearly defined and adhered to. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment to identify specific threats and vulnerabilities. This should be followed by a legal review to understand applicable federal and state laws regarding employee monitoring and privacy. A clear, narrowly tailored policy should be developed, outlining what will be monitored, why, and how the data will be used. This policy must be communicated effectively to all employees. Implementation should be proportionate to the identified risks, focusing on systems and activities directly related to those risks. Regular review and auditing of the monitoring program are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 2. Upon reviewing the latest regulatory guidance on mandatory security awareness training for financial institutions, a Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, is tasked with designing new training modules. The primary objective is to ensure compliance while fostering a strong security culture. Which of the following design approaches would be most effective and professionally sound? Option A. Develop modules that are highly interactive, role-specific, and incorporate regular knowledge checks and feedback mechanisms, with a plan for ongoing updates based on threat intelligence and user feedback. Option B. Create a comprehensive, lengthy training program that covers all potential regulatory requirements in detail, delivered annually to all employees. Option C. Implement a standardized, text-heavy training module that simply lists all compliance requirements and best practices, to be completed once every 2 years. Option D. Focus on creating visually engaging and entertaining content, such as short animated videos, that broadly touch upon security concepts without delving into specific organizational policies or risks. The correct answer is A. Develop modules that are highly interactive, role-specific, and incorporate regular knowledge checks and feedback mechanisms, with a plan for ongoing updates based on threat intelligence and user feedback. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because designing effective security awareness training requires balancing regulatory compliance with practical engagement and measurable impact. A Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, must consider not only what the regulations mandate, but also how to foster a genuine security culture within the organization. The effectiveness of training is paramount, as poorly designed modules can lead to compliance failures, increased security risks, and wasted resources. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both compliant and impactful. The correct approach involves a data-driven, iterative design process that prioritizes user engagement and measurable outcomes, aligning with the principles of effective adult learning and the spirit of regulatory requirements for robust security awareness. This approach is justified by the need to demonstrate due diligence and a proactive security posture, which is implicitly or explicitly required by most regulatory frameworks that mandate security awareness training. By focusing on relevance, interactivity, and feedback, the training is more likely to achieve its objectives of changing behavior and reducing risk, thereby fulfilling the underlying intent of regulations. An approach that solely focuses on ticking regulatory boxes without considering user engagement or effectiveness fails to meet the professional standard of a CSAM. This can lead to superficial compliance, where employees merely go through the motions without internalizing the security principles, leaving the organization vulnerable. Such an approach risks regulatory scrutiny for not implementing effective training as often stipulated. An approach that prioritizes entertainment over substance, while potentially increasing engagement, can dilute critical security messages and fail to adequately address specific threats or compliance obligations. This can result in a lack of understanding of actual risks and responsibilities, undermining the purpose of the training. An approach that relies solely on a one-size-fits-all, infrequent training model neglects the dynamic nature of threats and the varying needs of different employee roles. This can lead to outdated information, irrelevant content for certain groups, and a failure to address emerging risks, thereby not providing the continuous and adaptive security awareness that regulations often imply. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements and their intent. 2. Assessing the organization's unique risk profile and culture. 3. Identifying target audience needs and learning preferences. 4. Designing training modules that are relevant, engaging, and actionable. 5. Incorporating mechanisms for feedback and continuous improvement. 6. measuring the effectiveness of the training against defined objectives and compliance metrics. Question 3. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, is evaluating new methods to enhance employee engagement with mandatory security awareness training. Considering the CSAM focus on practical security knowledge and behavioral change, which of the following approaches to incorporating gamification and interactive elements is most aligned with best practices and regulatory expectations? Option A. Developing an elaborate role-playing game with a fictional narrative that has only tangential connections to cybersecurity principles. Option B. Introducing a competitive leaderboard that rewards employees who complete basic security modules the fastest, regardless of comprehension. Option C. Utilizing a simple point scoring system for answering multiple-choice questions, with no emphasis on the application of learned concepts. Option D. Implementing interactive scenarios that require employees to identify and report simulated phishing attempts, with progress tracked on a personal dashboard. The correct answer is D. Implementing interactive scenarios that require employees to identify and report simulated phishing attempts, with progress tracked on a personal dashboard. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for engaging security awareness training with the absolute priority of ensuring compliance with the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, regulatory framework. The CSAM framework, as defined for this exam, emphasizes the practical application of security principles and the effectiveness of training delivery. Simply adopting popular gamification trends without considering their alignment with specific CSAM objectives or potential for distraction can lead to ineffective training and, consequently, non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to select and implement interactive elements that genuinely enhance understanding and retention of security best practices, rather than merely providing superficial entertainment. The correct approach involves integrating gamified elements and interactive features that directly reinforce key security concepts mandated by the CSAM framework. This means designing challenges, quizzes, or simulations that require users to apply learned security principles in realistic scenarios, thereby deepening comprehension and promoting behavioral change. For instance, a phishing simulation that requires users to identify malicious indicators and report them aligns with CSAM focus on practical threat mitigation. This approach is justified by the CSAM implicit requirement for training to be effective and demonstrably contribute to improved security posture. By focusing on learning outcomes and practical application, this method ensures that gamification serves the core purpose of security awareness rather than detracting from it. An incorrect approach would be to implement a leaderboard system solely based on speed of completion for basic security modules. This fails to assess actual understanding or application of security principles, potentially encouraging superficial engagement to gain points rather than genuine learning. This approach risks violating the CSAM implicit expectation of meaningful knowledge acquisition and could lead to a false sense of security. Another incorrect approach would be to introduce complex, narrative-driven games with minimal direct relevance to core security awareness topics. While potentially engaging, such an approach could divert user attention from critical security messages and consume valuable training time without a clear return on investment in terms of enhanced security knowledge. This deviates from the CSAM objective of practical security education. A third incorrect approach would be to use interactive elements that rely on competitive elements without a clear learning objective, such as a simple point-scoring game unrelated to security tasks. This prioritizes engagement over education and fails to leverage gamification to reinforce specific security behaviors or knowledge, thus undermining the effectiveness of the training program. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the CSAM framework's objectives and requirements. Before implementing any gamification or interactive element, a security awareness manager should ask, does this element directly support a learning objective outlined by the CSAM framework? Does it enhance understanding or retention of critical security practices? Does it have the potential to distract from or undermine the core security message? A robust evaluation process, potentially including pilot testing and feedback mechanisms, should be employed to ensure that interactive elements are both engaging and educationally sound, ultimately contributing to a stronger security culture as envisioned by the CSAM. Question 4. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's security awareness program has not been updated to reflect the significant increase in sophisticated phishing attacks leveraging AI-generated content and the growing prevalence of deepfake technology in social engineering campaigns over the past year. The Security Awareness Manager is tasked with addressing this gap. Which of the following represents the most effective and compliant approach to staying current with these emerging threats and trends? Option A. Conduct an immediate, organization-wide mandatory training session on all newly reported cybersecurity incidents globally, regardless of their direct relevance to the organization's specific risks. Option B. Wait for the organization to experience a significant security incident related to AI-driven phishing or deepfakes before initiating any updates to the security awareness program. Option C. Proactively subscribe to multiple reputable cybersecurity threat intelligence feeds, analyze their reports for trends relevant to the organization's industry and attack surface, and then develop targeted training modules and communication campaigns to address these specific evolving threats. Option D. Focus solely on updating the training content based on the most sensationalized cybersecurity news headline, without a formal process for threat assessment or prioritization. The correct answer is C. Proactively subscribe to multiple reputable cybersecurity threat intelligence feeds, analyze their reports for trends relevant to the organization's industry and attack surface, and then develop targeted training modules and communication campaigns to address these specific evolving threats. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for security awareness managers: the dynamic nature of the threat landscape. The professional challenge lies in balancing proactive threat intelligence gathering with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the need for actionable, relevant training. Simply reacting to every new threat is unsustainable and can dilute the effectiveness of the awareness program. Conversely, ignoring emerging threats can leave the organization vulnerable. Careful judgment is required to identify which trends pose the most significant risk and warrant immediate attention within the existing program framework. The correct approach involves establishing a systematic process for monitoring and evaluating emerging threats and trends. This includes leveraging multiple intelligence sources, assessing their relevance to the organization's specific context and risk profile, and then integrating the findings into the security awareness program in a timely and effective manner. This proactive and risk-based methodology aligns with the principles of robust security governance, which mandates that security programs adapt to evolving threats to maintain their efficacy. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to protecting the organization and its stakeholders from harm. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on anecdotal evidence or the loudest voices in the security community. This lacks a structured, evidence-based foundation and can lead to misallocation of resources towards low-impact threats. It fails to meet the regulatory expectation of a risk-informed security program. Another incorrect approach is to wait for a significant security incident to occur before updating the awareness program. This reactive stance is a clear failure of due diligence and demonstrates a lack of foresight. It exposes the organization to preventable risks and can have severe regulatory and reputational consequences, as it suggests a failure to implement reasonable security measures. A further incorrect approach is to implement training on every single emerging threat without prioritization or consideration of the organization's specific risk landscape. This can lead to awareness fatigue among employees, diminishing the impact of critical security messages and wasting valuable training resources. It fails to demonstrate a strategic and efficient use of program resources, which is an implicit expectation of effective governance. The professional decision-making process should involve: 1. Identifying reliable and diverse sources of threat intelligence. 2. Developing a framework for assessing the relevance and potential impact of emerging threats on the organization. 3. Prioritizing training updates based on this risk assessment. 4. Integrating new content into the awareness program in a way that is digestible and actionable for employees. 5. Regularly reviewing and refining the threat intelligence and training integration process. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that a significant portion of employees have not completed the mandatory annual security awareness training within the designated timeframe. Several departments are exhibiting higher rates of non-compliance than others. What is the most appropriate next step for the Certified Security Awareness Manager to ensure compliance and enhance the overall security posture? Option A. Implement a blanket policy of revoking system access for all employees who have not completed the training by the deadline, without further investigation into the causes of their non-compliance. Option B. Conduct a thorough analysis to identify common reasons for non-compliance within the affected departments, such as accessibility issues, scheduling conflicts, or lack of managerial reinforcement, and develop targeted support strategies before considering punitive measures. Option C. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against all employees who have not completed the training, regardless of departmental trends or individual circumstances. Option D. Overlook the non-compliance for the current cycle, assuming that employees will complete the training eventually, and focus on developing new training content for the next cycle. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against all employees who have not completed the training, regardless of departmental trends or individual circumstances. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive security awareness training with the practicalities of tracking completion and ensuring compliance across a diverse workforce. The Certified Security Awareness Manager (CSAM) role demands not only understanding security threats, but also the effective implementation and monitoring of training programs. The challenge lies in interpreting raw data to identify genuine compliance issues versus systemic problems, and in taking appropriate, defensible actions. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreacting to minor deviations, while ensuring that significant compliance gaps are addressed promptly and effectively, all within the bounds of applicable regulations and ethical considerations. The correct approach involves a nuanced analysis of completion rates, focusing on identifying patterns of noncompliance that suggest systemic issues rather than isolated incidents. This approach prioritizes understanding the root cause of noncompliance, such as accessibility barriers, lack of management support, or ineffective communication, before escalating to punitive measures. This aligns with the principles of fostering a security-aware culture, which is a core objective of security awareness training. From a regulatory perspective, a proactive and supportive approach to compliance is generally favored. For instance, in the U.S., frameworks like NIST Cybersecurity Framework emphasize training and awareness as critical components of a robust security program. While specific regulations may mandate training completion, the emphasis is often on achieving a secure posture, which is best supported by understanding and addressing barriers to compliance rather than solely focusing on punitive actions. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a commitment to employee development and support, fostering trust and encouraging genuine engagement with security principles. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate punitive action for any mistraining, without investigating the underlying reasons, fails to address potential systemic issues. This can lead to resentment, a perception of unfairness, and a superficial compliance that doesn't translate to improved security behavior. It also risks violating principles of due process and fairness, which are often implicitly or explicitly part of organizational policies, and by extension, regulatory expectations for fair treatment of employees. Another incorrect approach that involves ignoring completion data altogether or treating all deviations as minor oversights is equally problematic. This approach neglects the fundamental requirement for demonstrable training completion and compliance, which is often a regulatory or contractual obligation. For example, in the U.S., certain industries are subject to specific data protection regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, GLBA for financial services, that mandate employee training and may require evidence of such training. Failing to track and address noncompliance can expose the organization to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. It also undermines the credibility of the Security Awareness Program and the CSAM role. A third incorrect approach that involves selectively enforcing compliance based on subjective criteria or personal relationships is ethically indefensible and can lead to claims of discrimination. This approach erodes trust within the organization and creates an environment where compliance is seen as arbitrary, rather than a consistent organizational requirement. It also creates significant legal and reputational risks for the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of training data, identifying trends and outliers. This should be followed by an investigation into the root causes of noncompliance, which may involve direct communication with employees, managers, and relevant departments. Based on this analysis, a tiered approach to remediation should be implemented, starting with supportive measures and escalating to disciplinary actions only when necessary and justified. This process ensures that compliance efforts are effective, fair, and aligned with both regulatory requirements and the goal of fostering a strong security culture. Question 6. Assessment of an organization's security awareness needs and gaps in the context of U.S. federal regulations should prioritize which of the following processes to ensure optimal resource allocation and compliance. Option A. Reviewing industry best practices and general cybersecurity trends to identify potential training topics without a specific analysis of the organization's unique risk profile or direct mapping to U.S. regulatory mandates. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies specific threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the organization's data and operations, followed by a gap analysis that compares current employee awareness levels against these identified risks and applicable U.S. regulatory requirements, such as those outlined in HIPAA or SOX, to inform targeted training development. Option C. Implementing a broad, general security awareness training program covering common cyber threats, assuming that a wide net will catch most potential issues and satisfy general compliance expectations. Option D. Focusing on employee feedback regarding training preferences and ease of access to materials, with the understanding that high employee satisfaction will naturally lead to better security outcomes and compliance. The correct answer is B. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies specific threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the organization's data and operations, followed by a gap analysis that compares current employee awareness levels against these identified risks and applicable U.S. regulatory requirements, such as those outlined in HIPAA or SOX, to inform targeted training development. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because effectively identifying security awareness needs and gaps requires a nuanced understanding of both the organization's specific risks and the applicable regulatory landscape. A superficial assessment can lead to misallocated resources, ineffective training, and ultimately, a failure to meet compliance obligations. Careful judgment is required to balance the breadth of potential threats with the practicalities of implementation and the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based process that directly links identified risks and regulatory mandates to the current state of employee security awareness. This approach ensures that training efforts are targeted, relevant, and demonstrably contribute to mitigating identified vulnerabilities and meeting compliance requirements. Specifically, it involves gathering data on current security incidents, employee knowledge levels through surveys or assessments, and a thorough review of applicable regulations to pinpoint areas where awareness is lacking or insufficient. This data-driven methodology allows for the prioritization of training needs based on the highest risks and most critical compliance obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on broad, generic security topics without a specific link to organizational risks or regulatory requirements fails to address the unique vulnerabilities of the company. This can lead to training that is perceived as irrelevant by employees, reducing engagement and effectiveness, and crucially, may not satisfy the specific due diligence or risk management obligations mandated by regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes employee convenience or perceived ease of implementation over actual risk mitigation and compliance demonstrates a misunderstanding of the core purpose of security awareness training. The user experience is important. It should not supersede the fundamental goal of protecting organizational assets and adhering to legal and ethical standards. This approach risks creating a false sense of security while leaving critical gaps unaddressed. A third incorrect approach that relies on outdated or anecdotal information about threats and awareness levels is inherently flawed. Security threats evolve rapidly, and regulatory expectations can change. Basing a needs assessment on such information will inevitably lead to an inaccurate understanding of current gaps and a failure to prepare employees for contemporary risks and compliance demands. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured needs assessment methodology. This begins with clearly defining the scope of the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, and gathering data from multiple sources, including incident reports, audit findings, employee feedback, and regulatory guidance. The data should then be analyzed to identify specific gaps between the desired state of security awareness and the current state, with a clear mapping to identified risks and regulatory obligations. Finally, this analysis should inform the development of a targeted and measurable security awareness program. Question 7. Which approach would be most effective for a certified security awareness manager to secure adequate program budget and resources, considering the organization's current risk landscape and regulatory compliance obligations? Option A. Submit a budget request based on the previous year's allocation, with a modest increase to cover general inflation, without a detailed review of current risks or program effectiveness. Option B. Present a budget that prioritizes training on emerging threats, such as advanced phishing techniques, without a thorough assessment of whether these threats represent the most significant risks to the organization, or if foundational security awareness is adequately addressed. Option C. Request funding for the most advanced and comprehensive security awareness training platform available on the market, citing its widespread adoption by other leading organizations. Option D. Develop a comprehensive budget proposal that quantifies identified risks, outlines specific training initiatives to mitigate those risks, and clearly links proposed expenditures to demonstrable improvements in security posture and compliance with relevant regulations. The correct answer is D. Develop a comprehensive budget proposal that quantifies identified risks, outlines specific training initiatives to mitigate those risks, and clearly links proposed expenditures to demonstrable improvements in security posture and compliance with relevant regulations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security awareness manager to balance the critical need for comprehensive security training with the reality of limited financial resources. The manager must advocate for the program's value while demonstrating fiscal responsibility and adherence to regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is needed to prioritize initiatives that offer the greatest return on investment in terms of risk reduction and compliance. The correct approach involves developing a data-driven budget proposal that clearly links proposed expenditures to specific security risks and regulatory obligations. This approach demonstrates a strategic understanding of the organization's security posture and its legal and ethical responsibilities. By presenting a well-researched budget that prioritizes high-impact training modules and leverages cost-effective delivery methods, the manager can build a strong case for necessary funding. This aligns with the principles of good governance and responsible resource management, ensuring that the security awareness program effectively mitigates identified risks and meets compliance mandates without unnecessary expenditure. An approach that focuses solely on the most expensive, cutting-edge solutions without a clear justification of their necessity or return on investment would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to misallocation of funds and failure to address more fundamental, yet less glamorous, security awareness needs. It also risks alienating stakeholders who may perceive the request as extravagant or lacking in practical application, potentially undermining future budget requests. Another incorrect approach would be to request funding based on perceived industry best practices without tailoring it to the organization's specific risk profile and regulatory environment. This can result in a program that is either over-engineered for the risks faced or insufficient in addressing unique compliance requirements. It demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an inability to prioritize effectively. Finally, an approach that relies on vague justifications or emotional appeals, rather than concrete data and risk assessments, is also professionally unsound. This fails to provide stakeholders with the information they need to make informed decisions about resource allocation and can be perceived as unprofessional or lacking in credibility. It does not demonstrate the necessary due diligence required for responsible budgeting. Professionals should approach program budgeting by first conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify the most significant threats to the organization. This should be followed by an analysis of current security awareness program, effectiveness, and identification of gaps. The next step is to research and propose solutions that directly address these identified risks and gaps, prioritizing those with the highest potential impact on risk reduction and compliance. Budget proposals should be supported by data, including cost-benefit analyses where appropriate, and clearly articulate how the requested funds will contribute to achieving organizational security objectives and meeting regulatory obligations. Question 8. Implementation of a comprehensive security awareness program requires careful consideration of delivery methods to maximize effectiveness and compliance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for managing security awareness training within a regulated environment? Option A. Delivering security awareness training only reactively, in direct response to security incidents. Option B. A single, extended training session covering all potential security threats and policies at once. Option C. Focusing solely on implementing technical security controls, assuming employees will adapt without formal awareness training. Option D. A phased rollout of modular training content, prioritizing critical risks and allowing for iterative feedback and refinement. The correct answer is D. A phased rollout of modular training content, prioritizing critical risks and allowing for iterative feedback and refinement. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security awareness program management, balancing the need for comprehensive training with the practical constraints of resource allocation and employee engagement. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method to achieve the program's objectives, ensuring that all employees receive necessary information without overwhelming them or creating compliance gaps. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both operationally sound and ethically defensible, aligning with the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of training modules, prioritizing critical security risks based on the organization's specific threat landscape and regulatory requirements. This method is professionally sound because it allows for focused learning, better retention, and the ability to adapt the program based on initial feedback and observed effectiveness. It aligns with best practices in adult learning and program management, ensuring that resources are used efficiently and that the most impactful security behaviors are addressed first. From a regulatory perspective, this phased approach allows for demonstrable progress in addressing identified risks, which can be crucial during audits or incident investigations. It also provides flexibility to incorporate new threats or regulatory updates more readily. An incorrect approach that relies solely on a single, lengthy, all-encompassing training session fails to account for adult learning principles, leading to information overload and reduced retention. This can result in a superficial understanding of critical security concepts, undermining the program's effectiveness and potentially leaving the organization vulnerable. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately equip employees with the knowledge they need to protect themselves and the organization. Another incorrect approach, which is to deliver training only on an ad hoc basis in response to incidents, is reactive rather than proactive. This approach creates significant compliance gaps, as it fails to address systemic risks or educate employees on preventative measures. It also demonstrates a lack of commitment to ongoing security awareness, which can be viewed unfavorably by regulators and can lead to repeated incidents. Finally, an approach that focuses exclusively on technical controls without a corresponding awareness component is fundamentally flawed. Security awareness is a critical layer of defense. Relying solely on technology ignores the human element, which is often the weakest link in the security chain. This approach neglects the ethical responsibility to educate employees about their role in maintaining security and can lead to a false sense of security, leaving the organization exposed to social engineering attacks and other human factor vulnerabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment to identify the most critical security threats and associated employee behaviors. This should be followed by a needs analysis to understand the current knowledge gaps and learning preferences of the target audience. Program objectives should be clearly defined, and training content should be developed or curated to directly address these objectives. A phased rollout, incorporating feedback mechanisms and ongoing evaluation, allows for continuous improvement and ensures that the program remains relevant and effective in managing security risks and meeting compliance obligations. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that the current security awareness training program, which primarily consists of annual, lengthy policy documents distributed via email, is resulting in low employee engagement and a high rate of security incidents related to phishing and password compromise. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, for a U.S.-based financial institution, you are tasked with improving the program's effectiveness and demonstrating compliance with relevant regulations, Which of the following strategies would be the most appropriate and effective for enhancing the security awareness program? Option A. Reduce the frequency of security awareness communication to once every 2 years to avoid overwhelming employees with information. Option B. Develop and implement a comprehensive training program that incorporates a variety of content formats, including short, engaging videos on common threats, interactive infographics explaining data protection principles, and regular, short quizzes to reinforce learning and assess comprehension. Option C. Update the existing annual policy documents with more technical jargon to ensure employees understand the severity of security threats at a deeper, technical level. Option D. Rely solely on mandatory in-person lectures that are delivered by IT staff, assuming that direct instruction is the most authoritative method of knowledge transfer. The correct answer is B. Develop and implement a comprehensive training program that incorporates a variety of content formats, including short, engaging videos on common threats, interactive infographics explaining data protection principles, and regular, short quizzes to reinforce learning and assess comprehension. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for a Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, in the United States, effectively communicating critical security information to a diverse workforce with varying learning styles and technical proficiencies. The challenge lies in moving beyond a one-size-fits-all approach to training and adopting methods that demonstrably improve comprehension and retention, thereby reducing security risks. This requires a strategic understanding of how different content formats cater to different learning preferences and how to measure their effectiveness in a way that aligns with regulatory expectations for security awareness. The correct approach involves leveraging a variety of content formats, such as videos, infographics, and interactive quizzes, to cater to diverse learning styles and reinforce key messages. This strategy is grounded in best practices for adult learning and is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, which mandate effective security awareness training. While these regulations do not prescribe specific formats, they require that training be comprehensive and understandable, which a multi-format approach facilitates. Furthermore, the inclusion of quizzes allows for measurable assessment of comprehension, providing data to demonstrate the effectiveness of the training program to auditors and management, aligning with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on lengthy text-based documents or infrequent, generic email blasts. This fails to acknowledge the diverse learning needs of employees and is unlikely to achieve the deep engagement required for effective security awareness. Such an approach could be seen as a failure to implement reasonable safeguards, as required by GLBA, or to ensure that workforce members are adequately trained on privacy and security policies as mandated by HIPAA. The lack of varied formats and assessment mechanisms means the organization cannot effectively demonstrate that employees have understood and can apply the security principles, leaving it vulnerable to regulatory scrutiny and potential penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to exclusively use highly technical, jargon-filled videos that assume a high level of prior knowledge. While visually engaging, this format can alienate employees who are not technically inclined, leading to disengagement and a lack of comprehension. This again falls short of the regulatory requirement for understandable and effective training. The organization would struggle to prove that it has met its obligations to educate its workforce on security risks and best practices, potentially leading to compliance issues. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a needs assessment to understand the workforce's current knowledge, technical capabilities, and preferred learning styles. This should be followed by the development of a training strategy that incorporates a mix of formats, each designed to convey specific learning objectives. Crucially, the strategy must include mechanisms for assessing comprehension and retention, such as quizzes, simulations, or scenario-based exercises. This data-driven approach allows for continuous improvement of the training program and provides tangible evidence of compliance and risk reduction. Question 10. During the evaluation of current security awareness practices within a U.S.-based financial services firm, which of the following approaches would best ensure regulatory compliance and effective risk mitigation? Option A. Implementing the newest gamified training platform available on the market, regardless of its alignment with current identified risks or regulatory mandates. Option B, benchmarking the current training content and delivery methods against industry best practices and relevant U.S. financial regulations, such as those from the SEC and FINRA, and assessing their impact on employee behavior through metrics like phishing simulation success rates and reported security incidents. Option C, relying solely on anonymous employee surveys to gauge satisfaction with the existing security awareness training program. Option D, reviewing training completion rates and ensuring all employees have accessed the latest compliance modules. The correct answer is D, reviewing training completion rates and ensuring all employees have accessed the latest compliance modules. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because evaluating current security awareness practices requires a nuanced understanding of both the organization's specific risks and the applicable regulatory landscape. A superficial assessment can lead to a false sense of security, leaving the organization vulnerable to threats and non-compliant with legal obligations. The Certified Security Awareness Manager (CSAM) designation implies a responsibility to ensure practices are not only effective, but also legally sound. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review that benchmarks current practices against established industry standards and relevant regulatory requirements. This includes analyzing training content for accuracy and completeness, assessing the effectiveness of delivery methods through metrics like phishing simulation, click-through rates, and completion rates, and verifying that training addresses the specific threats faced by the organization and its employees. This approach is right because it directly aligns with the CSAM mandate to foster a secure culture that is both robust and compliant. For instance, in the U.S., regulations like HIPAA for healthcare, GLBA for financial institutions, and various state data breach notification laws implicitly or explicitly require organizations to implement reasonable security measures, which include effective security awareness training. A thorough evaluation ensures these measures are in place and meet legal standards, preventing potential fines and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of training modules completed by employees fails to assess the quality or impact of the training. This is a regulatory failure because compliance is not merely about ticking boxes. It's about demonstrating a genuine effort to mitigate risks. Many regulations require demonstrable effectiveness, not just participation. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the perceived ease of implementing new training technologies over assessing the current program's effectiveness is also problematic. This prioritizes novelty over substance and can lead to wasted resources on solutions that don't address the root causes of security vulnerabilities. Ethically, this approach neglects the duty to protect sensitive data and the organization's assets. Finally, an approach that relies exclusively on employee feedback without objective metrics or regulatory alignment is insufficient. While employee feedback is valuable, it doesn't guarantee that the training is addressing all necessary security controls or meeting legal requirements. This can lead to a gap between employee perception and actual security posture, posing a significant risk. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, risk-based approach. First, identify all applicable regulatory frameworks and industry best practices relevant to the organization's sector and location. Second, define clear objectives for the security awareness program, linking them to identified risks and compliance obligations. Third, develop a methodology for evaluating current practices that includes both qualitative e.g., content review policy alignment, and quantitative e.g., phishing simulation results, incident reporting trends measures. Fourth, analyze the findings against the defined objectives and regulatory requirements. Finally, use this comprehensive analysis to develop actionable recommendations for improvement, prioritizing those that address the most significant risks and compliance gaps. Question 11. The control framework reveals a significant, publicly disclosed data breach impacting a partner organization that handles sensitive customer data for your company. Employees are likely to be concerned about their own data and the company's security posture. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, what is the most appropriate approach to developing and disseminating immediate awareness content? Option A. Immediately issue a company-wide alert that broadly advises employees to be vigilant against phishing and to review general cybersecurity best practices, without specific details about the breach or its implications. Option B. Wait for the partner organization to release a full public statement and then create awareness content based solely on that external information. Option C. Send out an urgent email to all employees stating that a data breach has occurred and that they should immediately change all their passwords and avoid clicking on any links until further notice. Option D. Draft and distribute a detailed internal communication that confirms the breach, outlines the confirmed impact on customer data, provides specific, actionable steps for employees to take, e.g., password resets, reporting suspicious activity, and references relevant internal policies and applicable data protection regulations. The correct answer is A. Immediately issue a company-wide alert that broadly advises employees to be vigilant against phishing and to review general cybersecurity best practices without specific details about the breach or its implications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for security awareness managers, balancing the need for immediate, impactful communication with the requirement for accuracy and adherence to evolving regulatory landscapes. The pressure to respond quickly to a high-profile data breach, coupled with the organization's internal reporting structure and the need to maintain employee trust, creates a complex decision-making environment. The professional challenge lies in crafting a message that is both informative and reassuring, without overstepping established communication protocols or disseminating unverified information, which could lead to further reputational damage or regulatory scrutiny. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes accuracy, timeliness, and actionable guidance within the established regulatory framework. This approach recognizes that, while speed is important, it must not compromise the integrity of the information. By first confirming the scope and nature of the breach with the legal and IT security teams, the manager ensures the content is factually sound. Developing clear, concise guidance on immediate protective actions for employees, such as password resets and vigilance against phishing, provides actionable steps. Furthermore, referencing specific, relevant internal policies and external regulatory requirements, e.g., data breach notification laws applicable to the organization's jurisdiction, ensures compliance and reinforces the seriousness of the situation. This method is professionally sound because it aligns with the core responsibilities of a security awareness manager: to educate and protect the organization and its employees by providing accurate, relevant, and actionable information that supports regulatory compliance and fosters a secure culture. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency while managing risk effectively. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disseminating an immediate, broad-stroke alert without confirmed details or specific guidance is professionally unacceptable. This approach risks spreading misinformation, causing unnecessary panic, and potentially violating data privacy regulations by prematurely disclosing unverified information. It fails to provide employees with concrete, actionable steps, rendering the communication ineffective. Focusing solely on a generic reminder about cybersecurity best practices without acknowledging the specific breach is also professionally deficient. While general awareness is important, it lacks the timeliness and relevance required in a crisis. This approach misses a critical opportunity to educate employees on the specific threats posed by the current incident and to provide targeted guidance, thereby failing to adequately address the immediate risk. Relying exclusively on external news reports to inform the awareness campaign is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach outsources critical information gathering and verification, potentially leading to the dissemination of inaccurate or incomplete data. It bypasses internal expertise and established communication channels, undermining the organization's control over its narrative and potentially exposing it to legal repercussions for inaccurate public statements or internal communications. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a structured decision-making process. First, they should always seek to verify information with authoritative internal sources, legal, IT security, communications, before disseminating any awareness content, especially during an incident. Second, content development should focus on providing clear, actionable steps that employees can take to protect themselves and the organization. Third, all communications must be grounded in the relevant regulatory framework and internal policies, ensuring compliance and reinforcing organizational standards. Finally, a balance must be struck between speed and accuracy, with accuracy and regulatory compliance always taking precedence. Question 12. Performance analysis shows that recent security awareness training modules have a low completion rate and a high rate of reported confusion among employees regarding phishing attempts and password management best practices. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, which approach to revising these training materials is most likely to improve comprehension and effectiveness, adhering to the principles of accessible security education. Option A. Develop content using simple, everyday language, relatable scenarios, and visual aids, focusing on the why behind security actions. Option B. Incorporate more technical definitions and industry-specific terminology to ensure accuracy and depth of information. Option C. Reduce the overall length of the training modules significantly, assuming brevity equates to better engagement. Option D. Focus exclusively on the legal ramifications of security breaches, emphasizing penalties for non-compliance. The correct answer is B. Incorporate more technical definitions and industry-specific terminology to ensure accuracy and depth of information. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, must balance the need for comprehensive security education with the practical reality of employee comprehension. Overly technical or jargon-filled materials can lead to disengagement and a failure to absorb critical security information, undermining the very purpose of the training. Conversely, materials that are too simplistic might fail to convey the necessary nuances of complex threats, leaving employees vulnerable. The CSAM must exercise careful judgment to ensure the training is both informative and accessible, directly impacting the organization's security posture. The correct approach involves creating training materials that utilize clear, concise language, relatable analogies, and visual aids to explain security concepts. This method directly addresses the core requirement of making training easy to understand. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this aligns with the principle of ensuring all employees have the necessary knowledge to protect organizational assets and comply with security policies. For example, under general data protection regulations and common cybersecurity best practices, organizations have a duty to reasonably inform and train their employees on security risks and procedures. Failing to do so can be seen as a breach of that duty. An incorrect approach that relies heavily on technical jargon and acronyms without explanation fails to meet the accessibility requirement. This can lead to employees not understanding their responsibilities, potentially resulting in policy violations or security incidents, which could have regulatory implications if the organization is found to have not provided adequate training. Another incorrect approach that oversimplifies complex threats to the point of trivializing them fails to provide sufficient awareness of the actual risks. This can lead to a false sense of security and employees being unprepared for sophisticated attacks, again creating a regulatory and ethical gap in due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and engagement. This involves piloting training materials with a diverse group of employees to gauge comprehension, seeking feedback, and iterating on content. The focus should always be on translating complex security concepts into actionable, understandable guidance that empowers employees to be a strong line of defense, rather than a weak link. This proactive and user-centric approach ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of security awareness mandates. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that the current security awareness training program relies heavily on assessment tools to measure employee understanding and identify knowledge gaps. The program manager is considering several approaches for utilizing quizzes, tests, and surveys. Which approach best balances the need for effective assessment with regulatory compliance and ethical considerations? Option A. Make quiz and test completion a mandatory requirement for accessing all company systems, with no provision for retesting or additional training if an employee initially fails, and use surveys to gauge employee stress levels related to security protocols. Option B. Utilize quizzes and tests to track individual progress on a granular level, storing this data indefinitely for potential future audits, and employ surveys to collect detailed personal information about employees' home technology habits. Option C. Design quizzes and tests to assess understanding of security policies and procedures, using the aggregate results to identify common areas of weakness for targeted retraining, and utilize surveys to gather feedback on the training's clarity and relevance. Option D. Implement a system where quiz and test scores are directly linked to individual performance reviews and used as a primary factor in disciplinary action, while surveys are used to gather broad feedback on training topics. The correct answer is D. Implement a system where quiz and test scores are directly linked to individual performance reviews and used as a primary factor in disciplinary actions, while surveys are used to gather broad feedback on training topics. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for effective security awareness training with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning data privacy and the appropriate use of assessment tools. The Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, must ensure that quizzes, tests, and surveys are designed and implemented in a way that accurately measures knowledge and identifies gaps without infringing on employee privacy or creating undue stress. Careful judgment is required to select assessment methods that are both informative and compliant. The correct approach involves using quizzes and tests primarily to gauge understanding of security policies and procedures, and employing surveys to gather feedback on the training's effectiveness and identify areas for improvement. This method aligns with the principles of responsible data collection and use, focusing on aggregate data for program enhancement rather than individual punitive measures. From a regulatory perspective, this approach respects employee privacy by not collecting unnecessary personal information and by using assessment data for its intended purpose, improving security awareness. Ethically, it promotes a culture of learning and continuous improvement rather than one of surveillance and punishment. An incorrect approach that relies heavily on detailed individual performance tracking in quizzes and tests for disciplinary action fails to recognize the primary purpose of security awareness training, which is education and risk reduction, not performance evaluation for punitive measures. This can lead to employee anxiety and a reluctance to engage honestly with the training, potentially undermining its effectiveness. It also raises significant privacy concerns regarding the collection and use of sensitive individual performance data, which may not be adequately justified by the training's objectives and could violate data protection principles. Another incorrect approach that uses surveys to collect highly personal information unrelated to security awareness training, such as personal habits or beliefs, is ethically unsound and likely violates data privacy regulations. The scope of data collection must be directly relevant to the training's objectives. Collecting extraneous personal data is an overreach and can erode trust between employees and management. Finally, an approach that uses quizzes and tests solely as a pass/fail gate for access to critical systems without providing opportunities for remediation or retraining is also problematic. While assessments are important, the goal of security awareness is to improve behavior. Punitive measures without educational support are less effective in achieving long-term security improvements and can create a negative training experience. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment of any proposed assessment method. This includes evaluating its alignment with training objectives, its potential impact on employee morale and privacy, and its compliance with all applicable regulations. The focus should always be on using assessments to inform and improve the security awareness program, fostering a positive and secure organizational culture. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate a significant increase in social engineering attacks targeting customer service representatives. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, has tasked you with defining the primary goals for the upcoming security awareness program. Which of the following approaches best aligns with establishing effective program goals? Option A. To implement a gamified learning platform that rewards employees for the highest number of training modules completed. Option B. To conduct a mandatory company-wide training session on the latest cybersecurity threats, regardless of departmental relevance. Option C. To ensure 100% of customer service representatives complete all assigned phishing simulation exercises within the first quarter. Option D. To achieve a measurable reduction in successful social engineering incidents reported by the customer service department by 20% within 6 months, as evidenced by incident logs and user reporting. The correct answer is C. To ensure 100% of customer service representatives complete all assigned phishing simulation exercises within the first quarter. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate, tangible benefits of a proposed security awareness initiative with the broader, long-term strategic goals of the organization, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework of the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, exam. The core tension lies in prioritizing immediate compliance or a quick win versus establishing a program that demonstrably contributes to a sustainable security culture and measurable risk reduction, which is the ultimate objective of a security awareness program. Careful judgment is required to ensure that program goals are not only achievable, but also aligned with overarching business objectives and regulatory expectations for effective security awareness. The correct approach is to define program goals that are smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, and directly linked to identified risks and the organization's overall security posture. This involves translating high-level security objectives into actionable awareness outcomes. For example, if the risk assessment highlights a high susceptibility to phishing, a program goal might be to reduce successful phishing click-through rates by a specific percentage within a defined time frame. This approach is justified by the fundamental principles of effective program management and the implicit requirements of regulatory frameworks that mandate demonstrable risk mitigation. A program that sets clear, measurable goals allows for effective tracking of progress, justification of resources, and continuous improvement, ensuring that the security awareness program is a strategic asset rather than a mere compliance checkbox. An approach that focuses solely on the number of training modules completed fails to establish a meaningful connection between awareness activities and actual risk reduction. While training completion is a metric, it does not indicate comprehension, behavioral change, or impact on security incidents. This approach is ethically and regulatorily deficient because it prioritizes activity over outcome, potentially leading to a false sense of security and failing to meet the spirit of regulations that require effective security awareness programs. An approach that prioritizes the loudest or most visible security threat without a data-driven link to the organization's specific risk profile is also problematic. While addressing prominent threats is important, a security awareness program must be tailored to the unique risks faced by the organization. Focusing on a threat that is not a significant risk for the company is an inefficient use of resources and deviates from the core purpose of risk mitigation. This approach lacks the strategic alignment and data-driven decision-making expected of a professional security awareness manager. An approach that aims to achieve perfect security awareness across all employees immediately is unrealistic and sets an unachievable objective. While aspirational, such a goal can lead to discouragement and a perception of failure if not met. Effective program goal setting involves incremental, achievable steps that build towards a more secure culture over time. This approach is flawed because it lacks practicality and fails to establish a roadmap for sustained improvement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a cyclical approach. First, thoroughly understand the organization's risk landscape through robust risk assessments. Second, translate these identified risks into specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound program goals. Third, design and implement awareness initiatives that directly address these goals. Fourth, continuously monitor and measure the effectiveness of these initiatives against the defined goals. Finally, use the data gathered to refine the program and update goals, ensuring ongoing alignment with evolving risks and organizational objectives. This iterative process ensures that the security awareness program remains a dynamic and effective tool for risk management. Question 15. System analysis indicates that a financial services firm has distinct departments including trading, compliance, customer support, and IT operations. Each department handles different types of sensitive data and operates under specific regulatory oversight. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, which approach best aligns with identifying and addressing the unique security training needs for employees across these diverse roles to ensure comprehensive compliance and risk mitigation. Option A. Develop a single, comprehensive security awareness training module covering all common threats and regulatory principles, applicable to all employees regardless of their specific job function. Option B. Prioritize training efforts solely on the IT operations department, assuming they possess the highest level of technical understanding and are therefore best equipped to manage security risks. Option C. Rely on employees from each department to self-identify their security training needs and request specific training modules as they deem necessary. Option D. Conduct a detailed analysis of each job role's responsibilities, the types of data they access and process, and the specific regulatory requirements applicable to those functions. Then design tailored training modules for each role or group of similar roles. Correct answer is A. Develop a single comprehensive security awareness training module covering all common threats and regulatory principles, applicable to all employees regardless of their specific job function. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because effectively identifying training needs requires a nuanced understanding of diverse job roles and their associated risks, while simultaneously adhering to specific regulatory mandates. The Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, must balance the need for comprehensive coverage with the practical limitations of resources and the varying levels of technical expertise across different departments. Overlooking specific roles or assuming a one-size-fits-all approach can lead to significant security gaps and regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach involves a systematic, role-based needs assessment that directly links job functions to potential security risks and relevant regulatory requirements. This method ensures that training is targeted, relevant, and addresses the specific vulnerabilities inherent in each position. For example, a financial analyst's training needs will differ significantly from those of a customer service representative, even within the same organization. This tailored approach is ethically sound, as it respects the individual employee's role and responsibilities, and it is regulatorily compliant by ensuring that all personnel receive training pertinent to their duties and the data they handle, thereby mitigating risks as mandated by frameworks like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or specific industry regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card data. An incorrect approach would be to implement a generic, company-wide training program without considering job-specific responsibilities. This fails to address the unique risks associated with different roles, such as privileged access for IT administrators or sensitive customer data handling for sales teams. Such a broad approach is ethically questionable, as it may waste employee time on irrelevant information, and is regulatorily deficient because it does not guarantee that all employees receive training tailored to their specific security obligation, potentially leading to noncompliance with data protection laws or industry standards. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize training solely based on the perceived technical sophistication of a role, rather than its actual security impact. For instance, assuming that only IT staff require in-depth security awareness training overlooks the critical role of non-technical staff in preventing phishing attacks or social engineering. This is ethically problematic as it creates a false sense of security and regulatorily unsound because it neglects the human element, which is often the weakest link in the security chain, and fails to meet the broad training requirements often stipulated by regulations. Finally, an approach that relies solely on employee self-assessment of training needs is also flawed. While employee input is valuable, individuals may not fully grasp the scope of security risks associated with their roles or may underestimate their own vulnerabilities. This can lead to gaps in training that are not identified by the employees themselves, creating a significant blind spot. Ethically, this abdicates the manager's responsibility to ensure adequate security, and regulatorily, it fails to meet the proactive risk management obligations required by most security frameworks. The professional decision-making process should involve a multifaceted strategy. First, thoroughly understand the organization's operational processes and data flows. Second, map these processes to specific job roles and responsibilities. Third, identify the unique security risks and regulatory obligations associated with each role. And fourth, develop and deliver targeted training modules that directly address these identified needs. Regular review and updates based on evolving threats and regulatory changes are also crucial. Question 16. The audit findings indicate that the organization's current email campaigns and newsletters, intended to enhance security awareness, are not demonstrably reducing identified security risks. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, which of the following approaches would best address this finding while adhering to regulatory expectations for effective security awareness programs? Option A. Focus solely on improving the visual design and subject lines of all outgoing security emails to increase open rates, as higher engagement metrics are a primary indicator of program success. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify key security threats and vulnerabilities relevant to different employee roles. Then tailor email campaign content and delivery methods to address these specific risks and measure comprehension and behavioral impact. Option C. Increase the volume and frequency of all security-related email communications to ensure employees are exposed to more information, assuming that greater exposure will lead to better awareness. Option D. Implement a standardized, one-size-fits-all security awareness newsletter that covers general security topics, assuming that broad coverage will address the majority of potential risks across the organization. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify key security threats and vulnerabilities relevant to different employee roles, then tailor email campaign content and delivery methods to address these specific risks and measure comprehension and behavioral impact. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's security awareness program, specifically concerning the effectiveness of its email campaigns and newsletters in conveying critical security information. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, to move beyond simply delivering content to actively assessing its impact and ensuring it translates into measurable behavioral change, all while adhering to relevant regulatory frameworks. The CSAM must balance the need for comprehensive security education with the practical constraints of employee engagement and the organization's risk appetite. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment of the current email campaign and newsletter strategy. This entails identifying key security risks that need to be addressed, evaluating the current content and delivery methods against these risks, and then developing a plan to improve effectiveness based on identified gaps. This approach is correct because it is proactive, data-driven, and directly addresses the audit's concern by focusing on risk mitigation. It aligns with the principles of a robust security awareness program, which should be risk-informed and continuously improved. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and cybersecurity, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, or similar national regulations, often mandate that organizations implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect information, which includes effective security awareness training. A risk-based approach ensures that resources are allocated to the most critical areas, thereby demonstrating due diligence and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase the frequency of emails without evaluating their content or impact. This fails to address the root cause of the audit finding, which is likely not the volume of communication, but its effectiveness. It also represents a missed opportunity to align communication with specific organizational risks, potentially leading to wasted effort and continued vulnerability. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical metrics, such as open rates, without assessing comprehension or behavioral change. While open rates indicate initial engagement, they do not confirm that employees understand or are acting upon the security advice provided. This superficial measurement can create a false sense of security and does not fulfill the regulatory requirement of ensuring effective security practices. A third incorrect approach is to assume that all employees have the same level of understanding and require the same information. This ignores the diverse roles and risk profiles within an organization, leading to generic content that may not resonate or be relevant to all recipients, thus diminishing the overall effectiveness of the campaign and failing to adequately address specific risks faced by different departments or individuals. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the specific audit finding and its implications. 2. Identifying the relevant regulatory and ethical obligations. 3. Conducting a thorough risk assessment to pinpoint critical security areas. 4. Evaluating current communication strategies against identified risks and desired outcomes. 5. Developing and implementing targeted improvements based on the assessment, with clear metrics for success that go beyond superficial engagement. 6. Regularly reviewing and adapting the strategy based on feedback, performance data, and evolving threat landscapes. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a significant portion of employees find the current mandatory security awareness training modules to be overly technical, lengthy, and disconnected from their daily tasks, leading to low engagement and a perception of it being a mere compliance checkbox. As a certified security awareness manager, CSAM, operating under U.S. regulatory frameworks, what is the most effective and compliant approach to address this feedback? Option A. Acknowledge the feedback in a general company-wide email, stating that the training is a mandatory compliance requirement and that employees must complete it as is, with no immediate plans for revision due to resource constraints. Option B. Immediately overhaul the entire training program by introducing a completely new, gamified platform without first assessing the specific feedback or piloting the new system, assuming this will inherently solve the engagement issues. Option C. Focus solely on increasing the frequency of the existing training modules to reinforce the material, without addressing the core issues of technicality, length, and relevance identified in the feedback. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the training content to identify areas that can be simplified, made more interactive, and directly linked to real-world scenarios relevant to different job roles. Subsequently, pilot revised modules with a representative group of employees and gather further feedback before a full rollout, while also communicating the changes and the rationale behind them to all stakeholders. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the training content to identify areas that can be simplified, made more interactive, and directly linked to real-world scenarios relevant to different job roles. Subsequently, pilot revised modules with a representative group of employees and gather further feedback before a full rollout, while also communicating the changes and the rationale behind them to all stakeholders. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for continuous improvement in security awareness with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for user fatigue. Effectively incorporating user feedback is crucial for ensuring that security awareness programs remain relevant, engaging, and impactful, thereby reducing the likelihood of human error leading to security incidents. The Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, certification emphasizes practical application of security awareness principles within a defined regulatory context. For this exam, we will assume the jurisdiction is the United States, and therefore, relevant frameworks include NIST guidelines and general principles of data privacy and security, as mandated by various U.S. laws and regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven method for evaluating and integrating user feedback. This demonstrates a commitment to user-centric program design, which is ethically sound and aligns with best practices for effective security awareness. By prioritizing feedback that addresses usability, clarity, and perceived relevance, a CSAM can ensure the program resonates with the target audience, leading to better knowledge retention and behavioral change. This proactive engagement with users fosters a culture of security and can help identify blind spots or areas where training is falling short, ultimately contributing to a stronger security posture and compliance with regulatory expectations for security awareness training. An incorrect approach that dismisses feedback based on perceived inconvenience or a lack of immediate technical justification fails to recognize the importance of user experience in the effectiveness of any awareness program. This can lead to a disconnect between the training provided and the actual security behaviors of employees, potentially creating vulnerabilities. Ignoring feedback that suggests a lack of clarity or engagement can result in employees passively completing training without internalizing its importance, thereby failing to meet the spirit, if not the letter, of regulatory requirements for effective security awareness. Furthermore, a reactive approach that only addresses feedback after a significant incident occurs is a failure of proactive risk management and can have serious legal and reputational consequences. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Establishing clear channels for collecting user feedback on security awareness initiatives. 2. Categorizing and prioritizing feedback based on its potential impact on security awareness effectiveness and user experience. 3. Analyzing feedback for recurring themes and actionable insights. 4. Developing a plan to address prioritized feedback, including potential program adjustments, content revisions, or communication strategies. 5. Communicating back to users about how their feedback has been considered and what changes have been implemented, reinforcing their value and encouraging continued engagement. Question 18. Investigation of a mid-sized financial services firm in the United States reveals a significant gap in its security awareness training program. The firm has a diverse workforce, including executive leadership, customer service representatives, IT support staff, and back-office operations personnel. The current training is a single, mandatory online module covering general cybersecurity best practices, delivered annually. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, is concerned that this approach may not be adequately addressing the specific risks and responsibilities of each employee group, potentially leading to compliance issues under relevant U.S. financial regulations and an increased vulnerability to sophisticated cyber threats. As the Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, what is the most effective strategy to address this situation? Option A. Focus solely on creating a comprehensive policy document outlining all security procedures and require employees to sign an acknowledgement of receipt and understanding. Option B. Rely on the IT department to disseminate critical security updates and best practices to their respective teams, while the general workforce continues with the existing annual online module. Option C. Develop and implement a tiered security awareness training program that tailors content, delivery methods, and frequency based on employee roles, responsibilities, and their specific interaction with sensitive data or systems, while ensuring all training aligns with applicable U.S. regulatory requirements. Option D. Mandate that all employees complete an advanced, technically detailed cybersecurity certification program to ensure a high baseline of knowledge across the entire organization. The correct answer is C. Develop and implement a tiered security awareness training program that tailors content, delivery methods, and frequency based on employee roles, responsibilities, and their specific interaction with sensitive data or systems, while ensuring all training aligns with applicable U.S. regulatory requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for a Certified Security Awareness Manager, CSAM, in the United States, effectively communicating critical security information to a diverse workforce with varying levels of technical understanding and job responsibilities. The challenge lies in ensuring that the security awareness training is not only compliant with U.S. regulations like HIPAA for healthcare organizations or SOX for publicly traded companies, but also resonates with and is actionable for each specific audience. A one-size-fits-all approach risks being either too technical and overwhelming for some, or too simplistic and ineffective for others, leading to potential compliance gaps and increased security risks. The correct approach involves a nuanced strategy of tailoring content based on audience roles and responsibilities. This means developing distinct training modules or delivery methods for different groups, such as executive leadership, IT staff, customer-facing employees, and general administrative personnel. For instance, executives might receive high-level briefings on strategic risks and their oversight responsibilities, while IT staff would benefit from in-depth technical training on threat vectors and incident response. Customer-facing employees might focus on social engineering tactics and data handling protocols relevant to their interactions. This tailored approach ensures that the information is relevant, understandable, and directly applicable to each group's daily tasks and their specific impact on the organization's security posture. This aligns with the spirit of U.S. regulatory frameworks that mandate effective security awareness training, implying that such training must be comprehensible and practical for the intended recipients to be truly effective. Ethical considerations also demand that training be delivered in a manner that respects the audience's time and cognitive load, maximizing learning and minimizing frustration. An incorrect approach would be to deliver a single, generic security awareness training program to all employees. This fails to acknowledge the diverse needs and understanding levels within the organization. For example, a highly technical training session on advanced phishing techniques would likely be lost on administrative staff, while a basic overview of password security might be insufficient for IT professionals responsible for network infrastructure. This generic approach risks noncompliance with regulations that require effective training, as it is unlikely to achieve the desired level of understanding and behavioral change across all employee groups. It also represents an inefficient use of resources and employee time, potentially leading to disengagement and a false sense of security. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the most technically sophisticated employees, assuming they will disseminate information to others. While these individuals may grasp complex concepts, they may lack the communication skills or the mandate to effectively translate that knowledge to non-technical colleagues. This creates information silos and overlooks the critical role of every employee in the organization's security. Furthermore, it neglects the specific compliance requirements that often mandate training for all personnel who handle sensitive data or have access to critical systems, regardless of their technical role. A third incorrect approach would be to prioritize compliance checklists over actual learning. This might involve simply ticking boxes to show that training has occurred, without verifying comprehension or relevance. For example, providing a lengthy, dry document on data privacy regulations, without any interactive elements or role-specific examples, would likely result in employees skimming or ignoring the content. This approach fails to meet the underlying objective of security awareness training, which is to foster a security-conscious culture and reduce human error, thereby failing to adequately protect the organization from threats and potential regulatory penalties. The professional decision-making process for a CSAM in such a situation should begin with a thorough risk assessment and an understanding of the organization's specific regulatory obligations. This should be followed by an analysis of the different employee roles and their respective access levels, responsibilities, and potential impact on security. Based on this analysis, the CSAM should then design and implement a tiered training strategy, using a variety of delivery methods and content tailored to each audience. Regular feedback mechanisms and assessments should be incorporated to measure the effectiveness of the training and make necessary adjustments, ensuring continuous improvement and sustained compliance. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal that the security awareness program's objectives are currently defined in isolation from the organization's stated strategic growth initiatives. Which of the following approaches best aligns the security awareness program with the organization's overall strategy? Option A. Prioritize the adoption of cutting-edge security technologies and tools, assuming that advanced technology will inherently enhance the organization's strategic security posture. Option B. Measure the program's success primarily by the number of training sessions conducted and the completion rates of mandatory security awareness modules. Option C. Proactively engage with senior leadership and department heads to understand current and future strategic priorities. Then develop security awareness objectives that directly support these priorities and mitigate associated risks. Option D. Focus exclusively on fulfilling the minimum requirements mandated by relevant cybersecurity regulations and data privacy laws, ensuring all employees complete the prescribed training modules. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage with senior leadership and department heads to understand current and future strategic priorities, then develop security awareness objectives that directly support these priorities and mitigate associated risks. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security awareness management, ensuring that program efforts are not only compliant, but also strategically aligned with the overarching business objectives of the organization. The professional challenge lies in demonstrating the tangible value of security awareness beyond mere compliance, thereby securing ongoing support and resources. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for robust security practices with the practical realities of business operations and strategic goals. The correct approach involves actively engaging with senior leadership and key stakeholders to understand the organization's strategic priorities, and then tailoring the security awareness program's objectives to directly support these priorities. This ensures that the program is perceived as a strategic enabler rather than a cost center. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and cybersecurity, e.g., GDPR in the EU or NIST-CSF in the US, depending on the exam's specified jurisdiction, often mandate that security measures are proportionate to the risks faced by the organization. Aligning program objectives with strategy ensures this proportionality and demonstrates a risk-based approach, which is a cornerstone of effective governance and compliance. Ethically, it fosters a culture of shared responsibility for security, which is crucial for long-term success. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting minimum regulatory compliance requirements without considering strategic alignment fails to demonstrate the program's broader value. This can lead to underfunding and a perception of the program as a bureaucratic hurdle rather than a strategic asset. Such an approach might overlook opportunities to integrate security awareness into business processes, making it less effective and more easily bypassed. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of the latest security technologies without a clear understanding of how they support strategic objectives is also flawed. While technology is important, its effectiveness is significantly amplified when it is integrated into a comprehensive awareness program that addresses the human element and aligns with business goals. Without this alignment, technology investments may be misdirected or underutilized. A third incorrect approach that measures success solely by the number of training modules completed without assessing the actual impact on behavior or risk reduction is insufficient. While completion rates are a metric, they do not indicate whether the training has led to a more secure workforce or contributed to achieving strategic business outcomes. This approach misses the critical link between awareness activities and tangible improvements in the organization's security posture and strategic success. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a continuous feedback loop with organizational leadership. This includes understanding evolving business strategies, identifying key risks that could impede strategic goals, and then designing and adapting the security awareness program to mitigate those risks and support the achievement of strategic objectives. Regularly communicating the program's impact in terms of risk reduction and strategic contribution is vital for maintaining stakeholder buy-in and ensuring the program's long-term effectiveness. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a robust framework for delivering security awareness training. Considering the need to meet regulatory compliance and foster a strong security culture, which approach to training schedule and frequency is most professionally sound and effective? Option A. Training delivered only when a new security policy is introduced or a significant security incident occurs. Option B. A single, comprehensive annual training session covering all security topics. Option C. A risk-based, multifaceted training schedule incorporating regular foundational training, targeted modules, and continuous reinforcement activities throughout the year. Option D. Randomly scheduling training sessions throughout the year without a defined structure or recurring cadence. The correct answer is B. A single, comprehensive annual training session covering all security topics. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for security awareness managers, balancing the need for continuous security education with resource constraints and employee engagement. The core difficulty lies in determining the optimal frequency and timing of training to ensure compliance and effectiveness without causing training fatigue or overwhelming employees. Professional judgment is required to interpret regulatory mandates, which often set minimum requirements but do not dictate the most effective implementation strategy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a risk-based, multifaceted training schedule. This strategy aligns with regulatory expectations for ongoing security awareness by not relying on a single annual event. It acknowledges that different threats and employee roles require varying levels of attention and frequency. For instance, phishing simulations might be conducted quarterly, while broader policy updates could be biannual. This approach is justified by regulatory frameworks that emphasize a culture of security and continuous reinforcement, rather than a one-off compliance check. It also addresses the ethical imperative to equip employees with the most current knowledge to protect themselves and the organization. Incorrect approaches analysis. Conducting a single, comprehensive annual training session fails to meet the spirit of continuous awareness mandated by many regulations. It creates a knowledge gap between training events and leaves employees vulnerable to evolving threats. This approach is a compliance shortcut, not a genuine security enhancement. Implementing training only when a new policy is introduced or a security incident occurs is reactive and insufficient. Regulations typically require proactive and preventative measures, not just responses to events. This approach risks significant exposure between incidents and fails to build a consistent security mindset. Scheduling training randomly throughout the year without a structured plan can lead to inconsistent coverage and potential gaps. While it avoids a single annual event, it lacks the strategic foresight to address specific risks or reinforce key messages at appropriate intervals, potentially leading to missed compliance obligations or ineffective learning. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach training schedule development by first identifying applicable regulatory requirements for frequency and content. Then, conduct a risk assessment to understand the organization's specific threat landscape and the vulnerabilities of different employee groups. This informs the development of a tiered training program that includes regular foundational training, targeted modules for specific risks or roles, and continuous reinforcement through methods like phishing simulations and awareness campaigns. The schedule should be documented, communicated clearly to employees, and regularly reviewed for effectiveness, and updated based on emerging threats and regulatory changes.